watching.
Hello, dear. Welcome to Fear Tales. Tonight's story may sound simple, but by the time the wind stops howling outside your window, you'll wish you had never followed me into the heart of Texas. Tonight, I bring you 4 stories, 4 pieces of darkness stitched together from the dust, the swamps, the deserts, and the backroads of the Lone Star State. Lock your doors, dim your lights, and listen carefully, because in Texas, the land remembers everything. Story 1. The Hollow Beneath Caddo Lake. The cypress trees of Caddo Lake have always whispered. My grandfather told me that when I was 7 years old, sitting on the rotten porch of his stilt house in uncertain Texas. He said the Spanish moss didn't just hang from the branches, it listened, and whatever it heard, it carried down into the black water, where something older than Texas itself was waiting to remember. I didn't believe him, not then, not for 25 years, not until the autumn of 2019 when I went back to bury him. My name was Caleb Rourke. I was a folklorist at a university in Austin, the kind of man who collected ghost stories the way other men collected stamps. I thought I understood fear. I thought fear was a subject. I was wrong. Fear is a place, and that place was waiting for me at the end of a dirt road in Harrison County. The funeral was small, 6 mourners, all of them old, all of them from bayou towns nobody visits unless they're lost. After the service, an old Caddo woman named Mama Lorette gripped my wrist with fingers like wet bark. "Your grandfather kept something down, child. Don't you go pulling it up." I smiled politely. I had a doctorate. I'd stopped believing in monsters a long time ago. That was my first mistake. The cabin sat on stilts 12 feet above the waterline. Cypress knees rose around it like the fingers of buried giants, and floating mats of duckweed lay so thick on the surface that the lake looked like solid green earth. My grandfather had left me 3 things in his will: the cabin, his John boot, and a leather journal sealed shut with black wax and twine. The first night I sat at his kitchen table beneath a kerosene lamp and broke the seal. The first entry was dated October 1962. My grandfather would have been 24 years old. Found the hollow today. Tom Brimmer didn't come back from his trot line, so a few of us went looking. The water near Goose Prairie was warm in October. We followed the heat and found a place where the cypress grew in a perfect circle, and inside that circle, the lake had no bottom. I dropped 140 feet of weighted line, never touched mud. The line came back up dry. I turned the page with cold fingers. Tom is still missing, but last night I heard him calling from the water under the cabin. He said my name 3 times. I did not answer. Mama Lorette says you must never answer the 3rd time, because the 3rd time is when it has learned your voice.
I closed the journal. Outside, the bullfrogs stopped singing all at once. The silence that followed had weight. It pressed against my eardrums like deep water. And then, from beneath the floorboards of the cabin, I heard a soft, wet sound, like a palm being dragged slowly across the underside of the wood. I told myself it was a beaver. I told myself many things that night. The next morning, I rode to Mama Lorette's shack on the Louisiana side. She was waiting on the porch as if she'd known I was coming. "You read it," she said, not a question. "What is in the hollow?" I asked. She lit a cigarette with a kitchen match and let the flame burn all the way down to her fingertips before she shook it out. "The Caddo people were here 1,000 years before the Spanish. We had a name for it, but names give things shape, and that thing doesn't need any more shape than it already has. The old folks called it the Hollow Mouth. It eats sound first, then memory, then meat." "That's a metaphor," I said. My voice sounded small. She laughed, and there was no joy in it. Your grandfather thought so too. Then his brother Joseph went into the water in 1971, and your grandfather spent the next 50 years feeding that hole so it wouldn't come looking for the rest of his blood. Catfish, deer, a dog once in the drought of '88, and now, child, you are his blood. And the hole is hungry because nobody fed it last week, or the week before that, or the week before that. I drove back to Austin that afternoon. For 3 weeks, I almost convinced myself it was nothing. Then the dreams began. In the dreams, I was underwater, but I could breathe. The cypress roots stretched down forever, like the bars of a black cage. At the bottom, there was a circle of light, and inside the light was a mouth. Not lips, not teeth, just a hole in the world that was patiently learning to say my name. On the 22nd night, I woke to find my apartment soaked. Water dripped from the ceiling. Duckweed clung to my bedroom near, and in the steam on the bathroom glass, someone had written the word Caleb 3 times. The third one was still wet. I drove back to Caddo that same morning. I had to end it. I took my grandfather's John boat and rowed to the circle of cypress at Goose Prairie. The water there was warm, just like he wrote. Warm in November. I dropped his journal into the dark water as an offering. The pages did not sink. They dissolved like sugar. And then from beneath the boat I heard my name. Once, twice. I bit down on my tongue until I tasted blood. I would not answer. I would not give it the third. The boat began to rock. The water around me bulged upward as though something enormous were rising just below the surface, something the size of the lake itself. And then a voice came, not from below, but from behind me, a voice I knew. My grandfather's voice, soft, loving, familiar. "Caleb," he said. "Caleb. Caleb." I almost answered. God help me, I almost did. But I remembered Mama Lorette's words. The third time is when it has learned your voice. So instead, I whispered the only thing I could think of. I whispered, "I am not yours." The lake screamed. Not with sound, with absence. Every bird, every frog, every insect for a mile went silent in the same instant, and the silence was so violent it knocks me flat into the bottom of the boat. When I opened my eyes, the circle of cypress was gone. Just open water. Calm. Empty. I rowed back. I sold the cabin. I never went near water again. But sometimes, late at night in my Austin apartment, the faucet trips when it isn't on. And sometimes I hear a voice from the drain learning, practicing, getting closer. It only has 2 of my names so far. I pray every night that it never gets the third.
Out past Marfa, where the highway turns into a thin gray ribbon stretched between nothing and more nothing, there's a stretch of road that truckers call the Long Quiet. It runs 42 miles between the last gas station in Valentine and the first motel in Van Horn. There are no houses. There are no cell towers. There is only mesquite and dust and the wind and the bones of cattle that wandered too far from the herd. My name is Delia Carrasco. I drove that road on the night of August 14th, 2017. I have not slept a full night since. I was 26 years old, driving from El Paso to Austin to start a new job. My mother had warned me to leave before sunset. "Don't you cross that desert in the dark, mija. Things wake up out there." But I had been delayed. The sun was already a smear of blood on the horizon when I passed the last gas pump in Valentine. The attendant, a thin man with a white mustache, came out to the pump as I filled up. He looked at my license plate, then at my face, and he said something I'll never forget. "If you see a man walking on the side of the road tonight, don't stop, don't slow down, don't even look at him. Especially don't look at his feet." I laughed. He didn't. 20 miles into the Long Quiet, my radio died. Not the static out kind of dying. The screen went black, and the speakers exhaled like a person letting out their last breath. I tapped the dashboard. Nothing. The headlights flickered once, twice, then steadied. The road ahead of me was a tunnel of white light surrounded by an ocean of black. That is when I saw him. A man walking on the right shoulder of the highway. His back was to me. He wore a long, dark coat that hung past his knees and an old, wide-brimmed hat. His arms were too long.
I noticed that first. His fingertips brushed the sides of his calves as he walked. He did not turn when my headlights hit him. He did not flinch. He just kept walking, slow and steady, in the middle of nowhere, 20 miles from the nearest building. I remembered the gas attendant. Don't stop, don't slow down, don't even look at his feet. I pressed the gas pedal harder. As I passed him, I kept my eyes locked straight ahead, but in the corner of my vision, in the instant my headlights washed over him, I saw something I should not have seen. He had no shadow. The headlights were behind him. There should have been a long black shadow stretching out across the asphalt in front of him. There was nothing. Just the man and the empty road and the dust. I drove faster. The speedometer climbed, 80, 90, 100, and then I made the mistake. I looked in the rearview mirror.
He was still there, but he wasn't behind me anymore. He was right behind my car, walking. Not running, walking at the same slow pace while my speedometer screamed at 110 miles per hour. His head was tilted to the side, almost resting on his own shoulder, and his hat was gone. I could see his face now in the red glow of my taillights. It was a man's face, mostly, but the mouth was wrong. It went too far back. It split his head almost in half, and inside the mouth there were no teeth, just a soft black emptiness, like the inside of a cave. I screamed. I slammed the gas pedal to the floor. The engine roared. The needle climbed past 120. The mesquite trees on either side of the road blurred into walls of shadow. And he kept pace, walking, always walking. I begged the highway to give me anything, a truck, a light, a sign of life. The road gave me nothing, just more black and more dust and the soft scrape of his two long fingernails dragging across the back of my car. Then I remembered the last thing the gas attendant had said. Don't look at his feet. I had not looked. I had obeyed, but now I was alone, and I was going to die, and a small, terrible curiosity rose up in me. Why the feet? What was wrong with his feet? I tilted the rearview mirror down, just an inch, just enough. His feet were not touching the ground. He floated 4 inches above the asphalt, and beneath him, in the empty space where his shadow should have been, the road was rotting. The pavement bubbled and blackened beneath his hovering feet, like meat held over a flame. Something was leaking out of him, something that hated the world. I tore my eyes away. I prayed out loud in Spanish, the prayers my abuela had taught me when I was small. Padre nuestro, que estás en los cielos, over and over. I prayed until my throat was raw, and slowly the scraping at the back of my car stopped. The pressure in the air lifted. The radio crackled back to life with a burst of static and a fragment of a country song. I did not look in the mirror again. I did not stop until I saw the lights of Van Horn rising out of the dark like the gates of heaven. I pulled into the first motel I found. The clerk took one look at me and crossed himself. In the morning, I went to my car. The paint on the trunk was scorched and peeled in long lines that looked exactly like the marks of fingers. And on the back windshield, written in a thin film of desert dust, were 3 words. You looked down. I have driven across Texas 100 times since, but I will never, ever again take the long quiet after dark, because I know what walks there, and I know that I owe it something. And one night when my luck runs out, it is going to come and collect.
After Hurricane Ike tore Galveston Island apart in 2008, the prices on the old Victorian houses on Broadway dropped to almost nothing. That is how my husband, Mark, and I, 2 broke school teachers from Houston, ended up owning a 3-story house built in 1887. It had stained glass windows, a wraparound porch, a widow's walk on the roof. And the realtor told us with a strange smile, a basement. That was unusual. Houses in Galveston don't have basements. The water table is too high. The whole island floods. But this house, for some reason no one could explain, had been built with one. The realtor said the previous owners had kept it sealed. He recommended we do the same. We didn't listen. We moved in during the spring of 2010. For 6 months, the house was beautiful. We refinished the floor. After Hurricane Ike tore Galveston Island apart in 2008, the prices on the old Victorian houses on Broadway dropped to almost nothing. That is how my husband, Mark, and I, two broke school teachers from Houston, ended up owning a 3-story house built in 1887. It had stained glass windows, a wraparound porch, a widow's walk on the roof, and, the realtor told us with a strange smile, a basement. That was unusual. Houses in Galveston don't have basements. The water table is too high. The whole island floods. But this house, for some reason no one could explain, had been built with one. The realtor said the previous owners had kept it sealed. He recommended we do the same. We didn't listen. We moved in during the spring of 2010. For 6 months, the house was beautiful. We refinished the floors. We painted the parlor a deep ocean green. We were happy. And then, on a Tuesday in October, Mark went down into the basement. The door to the basement was in the kitchen pantry. It was held shut by an iron bolt that had rusted into its frame. Mark spent an hour with a hammer breaking it loose. I stood at the top of the stairs with a flashlight while he went down. The air that came up out of that hole did not smell like a basement. It did not smell like mildew or old wood or wet stone. It smelled like the ocean, like the deep ocean, like fish that have never seen sunlight. "Babe," Mark called up, "you gotta come see this." I came down. The basement was bigger than the footprint of the house. That was the first wrong thing. It stretched out far past where the walls should have been, into a darkness our flashlights could not pierce. The floor was made of old red brick, and in the very center of the room, set into the brick, there was a wooden hatch, like the hatch on a ship. It had a brass ring. Mark, being Mark, pulled it. The hatch opened onto black water, not a well, not a cistern. Black, salty, moving water that seemed to go down forever. A faint, warm wind rose out of it, and the wind smelled like breath, like something exhaling. "Close it," I said. My voice was barely a whisper. "Mark, close it, please."
He closed it. We went upstairs. We poured large glasses of wine and pretended we hadn't seen what we had seen. That night, the pipes in our house began to groan. Not the normal groan of old plumbing. A low, rhythmic groan, like something breathing through them. The first dream I had that night, I was standing on the widow's walk of our house, looking down at the Gulf. The water had pulled back, miles and miles, exposing the muddy floor of the ocean. And in the exposed mud, I saw it. He closed it. We went upstairs. We poured large glasses of wine and pretended we hadn't seen what we had seen. That night, the pipes in our house began to groan. Not the normal groan of old plumbing. A low, rhythmic groan, like something breathing through them. The first dream I had that night, I was standing on the widow's walk of our house, looking down at the Gulf. The water had pulled back, miles and miles, exposing the muddy floor of the ocean. And in the exposed mud, I saw towers, cities, things with the wrong number of sides, and something enormous was walking up the sand toward Galveston. Something so big I could only see its legs, and the legs had too many joints. I woke up. Mark was not in bed. I found him in the kitchen pantry. The basement door was open. He was standing at the top of the stairs, still asleep, swaying gently. When I touched his arm, his eyes opened, but they did not see me. "She's calling me," he said. His voice was flat. "She has been calling me for a long time. She wants me to come home." Then he blinked, and he was Mark again, and he had no memory of what he had said. I called a priest the next morning. Father Alvarez came in the afternoon. He was old and Cuban, and he had the kindest eyes I had ever seen. He walked through every room of the house, sprinkling holy water until he reached the pantry. At the basement door, he stopped. He went very still. Then he turned to me, and the kindness in his eyes had been replaced by something I can only describe as grief. "Mrs. Halloran," he said softly, "I cannot help you. This is older than my church. This is older than my God. The thing in your basement was already here when the first Spanish ship landed on this island. The Karankawa knew about it. They warned the Spaniards. The Spaniards did not listen. The pirates did not listen. The slavers did not listen. And now you do not listen either." He laughed. He did not take payment. The next morning, Mark was gone. His side of the bed was cold. His shoes were still by the door. His phone was on the nightstand. I searched the house, room by room, my heart hammering. I saved the basement for last. The pantry door was open. The basement door was open. The hatch in the brick floor was open. Standing at the edge of the open hatch, I could hear a voice, a woman's voice, singing far down in the dark. The song had no words. It was the most beautiful and the most terrible thing I'd ever heard. I knew with absolute certainty that if I went down into that water, I would find Mark. I also knew that whatever I found would not be Mark anymore.
I closed the hatch. I closed the basement door. I called Mark's brother, and I told him Mark had left me. I sold the house 6 weeks later at a tremendous loss to a young couple from Dallas. I did not tell them about the basement. God forgive me, I did not tell them. That was 13 years ago. Last week I drove past the house for the first time since I sold it. There were no lights on. The grass was dead. The for sale sign in the yard was sun-bleached and crooked. A neighbor told me the Dallas couple had vanished one night, leaving everything behind. The house had changed hands 4 times since. No one stayed longer than a year. But here's the part that wakes me up at night. Here is the part I cannot escape. Yesterday morning I received a postcard. It had no stamp. It had no return address. It was just sitting in my mailbox in the middle of Houston, 90 miles from Galveston. The front of the postcard was a faded photograph of the Gulf at sunset. The back, in Mark's handwriting, said only this: "She says it is your turn, my love. The basement is open. Come home."